Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
When we speak of lying, most people think of the outward lies, the lies of commission, but there's two types of lies. There's the lies of omission as well, where we withhold information or we don't speak the truth. And so what's interesting is I had a few like doozy lies for a very long time of commission, but I rationalized, I'm not a liar. And that one never resonated with me. And as I started working with more and more clients, a lot of clients really started looking at the lies of omission. And so this is why it's kind of a double-edged sword. So the lies of omission is not being true to what I'm wanting or not actually giving these different parts of me a name. So I struggled with depression right after college, and being a stuffer, I just thought, if I keep stuffing, it goes away and I'm fine. And it works for a little while, but there's only so much room to stuff. And so what I mean by lying is basically whatever you do in the dark eventually becomes exposed in the light. And so one of the things that I really tried to get away from, whether it was sedation from people, places, and things, even from myself, it was cutting off that process. So imagine processing the pain. The pain gets a little bit too much, and instead of completing the process, like football analogy is the easiest one. You run to the 99-yard line, and then you go, and you stop before you cross for the touchdown. Even though you ran 99 yards, you still don't get the points. And so I would start processing the pain. As soon as it got too painful, I'd cut it off, rinse, repeat. And this became the active lie of, I'm doing the work, but I wasn't allowing myself to sit what I call the pit of pain. And what I started to find is on the other side of that pain is actually the peace that I'd been wanting. But because I kept cutting it off or sedating before getting to that point, we never were able to reach the full process. And so by allowing ourselves, and this is the scary part that most people are like, I don't know. When we sit in the pit of pain, we process the pain.
Introducing a powerful new update from the Foojan app. Now with flexible subscription plans to fit your journey monthly, quarterly, or yearly. Our new AI-driven onboarding customizes your path to feeling better, faster, and enjoy a refreshed experience with stunning 3D interactive videos. Update now. Empower your inner voice with Foojan. Download today.
Welcome to the Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Foojan Zeine. I'm a psychotherapist, an author, and the creator of the Awareness Integration Theory. I'm so thrilled to have you, all of you, to join us today for what I promised you. It's a very interesting and insightful discussion. So today I speak with Mark Manderson. With multi-decade experience, he has dedicated his life to helping individuals break free from destructive habits and rebuild their lives. His approach goes beyond traditional treatment, combining science-backed strategies with compassionate care to create lasting change. Mark's mission is to break the stigma around addiction and mental health, proving that healing is possible for everyone with the right support. He wrote the book, The Recovery Way, to guide people toward overcoming self-sabotaging behaviors and develop Pacific Shores app to retain the brain for better mental health. His recovery center, Pacific Shores Recovery, which is in Newport Beach, California, has been a trusted name for over 25 years, offering everything from detox services, online counseling to support individuals and families healing from addiction. For those facing the toughest battles, veterans navigating life after service, men breaking free from destructive cycles, and women overcoming stress-induced substance abuse, find hope and direction through Mark's program. He provides the structure, support, and proof that with the right guidance and daily actions, anyone can transform their life. I had a really great conversation. We went over his book and some of the great points and the 4 codes that are stated in his book. And he really shares in a very beautiful way what are some of the ways that we need to look into, the habits that we need to look into, what is the area that we really need to dig deep in order to be able to flourish our life. So I'm sure you'll have a beautiful journey the same way that I did with him. Now, be sure to subscribe to my podcast on my YouTube channel. Please go in and give your views. Connect with me through my social media in any format that you like. My website, foojanzeine.com. Go to Foojan app and go through the guided journaling of 31 areas of your life, and meet Mira, which is the AI chatbot, which is trained in the awareness integration theory and could answer the questions that you have and share your thoughts with me. I'd love to hear from you. So without further ado, here's Mark Manderson.
Listen up if you want to promote your personal growth and self-awareness. I found the Foojan app last month and I have been absolutely loving it. I personally have never learned guided meditation, but thanks to this app, I now have learned incredible tools for my own stress relief and emotional self-awareness. Not to mention, there are self-evaluation tools and professional coaching available to utilize however your journey to self-discovery takes you. Join Foojan today and redefine your life one step at a time.
Intentional Parenting, a practical guide to awareness integration theory, written by Dr. Jafari, Dr. Foojan Zeine, and Dr. Manoukian, 3 experts in human development, is your step-by-step guide to raising a healthy child prepared for a culturally integrated world. You're supported in parenting infants to adolescents using the latest evidence-based scientific research on parenting. Order your copy on Amazon now.
Well, I'm so excited to have Mark Manderson with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for having me. I'm excited to jump in and see where this goes.
Yes, yes. I love to have this dialogue with you because I know that as going through your book, not only you've gone through this journey yourself, but you have now leading a life of going through and supporting everybody who is going through this journey and wants to go into the recovery process. So can you share a little bit about about your journey a little bit, and then what enticed you to create the program to be able to support others?
Yeah, so mine started, a lot of people ask, how old were you when you were introduced to drugs? And I was 8, but it's not your typical story of people in the industry. So I actually walked in on my aunt. She had OD'd, and she was in my room on the floor, and I didn't know what was going on. I thought it was kind of odd for her to be laying during the middle of the day on the floor instead of in the bed. So I went over and tried to wake her up and couldn't. I ran and grabbed my mom, and my mom fortunately revived her. But because it had been drug related, my mom ended up having to ask her to leave because there was me and my little sister at the time. And then same thing happened a few months later, but there was nobody there to help her. So she passed her. I want to say it's probably one of the first deaths that I remember in my family, and just the pain and chaos that it created. It was a ripple all the way from my grandpa to my uncle and cousins, and then my mom, because that was her sister, and it was just the two of them. And so that seed was kind of planted. And so I grew this incredibly, I'll call it a healthy fear of drugs and alcohol. And so it was, I don't ever want to do that. And I started making poor choices in other areas of life and found other ways to sedate from the pain and not do the work. And just, I'm known as a stuffer. And then once you stuff too much, then you become an exploder. But then you go right back to stuffing, as you know. And so it just got to the point where as I started down the journey and just really wanting to heal and kind of better understand why we do what we do, and that it's not just tied to drugs and alcohol, but to the core issue. I call it the core lie. And as I began to expose that and do a lot of work on myself, I thought, oh my goodness, this is such a different way to live. They don't teach this in school. No one really shared with me. And as I just started, I've always been an open book. As I just started sharing transparently, a lot of people were resonating with that and saying, well, I noticed your life has changed drastically. What are you doing? And then as I started sharing, I just saw an opportunity to help so many people. And it seems like the individuals that really want to help themselves are ones that struggle with drug and alcohol addiction. And so really when we address the core issue, that root an organic byproduct is there's no longer a desire to sedate, to do drugs or alcohol. And so I thought, this is so wonderful. I want to share this with as many people as possible, because so much of pain and suffering in life is self-inflicted. And so if I'm the one creating the majority of pain in my life, how do I find a way to stop those habits and those decisions and behaviors that continue to create this pain, even though I don't want it? And so that's kind of what led down this journey. And we just hit 25 years, so a quarter of a century of helping people heal through the things that create pain that lead to drinking and using and other methods to sedate.
Absolutely. I totally agree with what you shared. And, I've worked with addiction for many, many years, and I consider myself an addict. I never became addicted to hard drugs, but smoking cigarette for 35 years, and then, I took off the cigarette with food. So, and then, you get addicted to particular emotions that are constantly, like you say, if you're not suffering. So the dynamic is similar. It doesn't matter whether you're using what product or what substances or chemicals or products or behaviors you're using in order to do that. The dynamic, the internal dynamic is very similar, except the consequences are different, because you have, obviously, if you're using hard drugs or alcohol or behavior gambling, any other one, the consequences appear different. So sometimes when people look at addiction, they're like, all of those are different. And yes, because of the usage and because of the consequences, they appear different. But internally, like what you said, the not having the ability to handle pain, stuffing it, and not getting the skills in order to know how to handle that pain. We want to go into numbing ourselves one way or another, disconnecting from that. You also, in your book, I think you kind of nailed it very quickly about the lies that we tell ourselves, because one of the definitely a cornerstone symptom of addiction is the way we lie to ourselves consistently. It's almost like, I call it mine. I don't know about others. I call mine this little cute monkey who sits here and, like, slowly but surely just manipulates me so beautifully that, it just goes in and lies to me, from me. And learning about that part of us is such an important factor. And you say, your lies shape your beliefs, your values, and how you operate. And ultimately, your entire world, which becomes your reality, that's it. Like, your lies becomes your reality, and then you're trying to kind of maneuver around it. Can you share a little bit about what your experience about this kind of, like, lying to the self is, and what the ramifications are?
Yeah. And so when we speak of lying, most people think of the outward lies, the lies of commission, but there's two types of lies. There's the lies of omission as well, where we withhold information or we don't speak the truth. And so what's interesting is I had a few, like, doozy lies for a very long time of commission, but I rationalized, I'm not a liar. And that one never resonated with me. And as I started working with more and more clients, a lot of clients really started looking at the lies of omission. And so this is why it's kind of a double-edged sword. So the lies of omission is not being true to what I'm wanting, or not actually giving these different parts of me a name. So I struggled with depression right after college, and being a stuffer, I just thought, if I keep stuffing, it goes away and I'm fine. And it works for a little while, but there's only so much room to stuff. And so what I mean by lying is, basically, whatever you do in the dark eventually becomes exposed in the light. And so one of the things that I really tried to get away from, whether it was sedation from people, places, and things, even from myself, it was cutting off that process. So imagine processing the pain. The pain gets a little bit too much, and instead of completing the process, like football analogy is the easiest one. You run to the 99-yard line, and then you go, and you stop before you cross for the touchdown. Even though you ran 99 yards, you still don't get the points. And so I would start processing the pain. As soon as it got too painful, I'd cut it off, rinse, repeat. And this became the active lie of, well, I'm doing the work, but I wasn't allowing myself to sit what I call the pit of pain. And what I started to find is on the other side of that pain is actually the peace that I'd been wanting. But because I kept cutting it off or sedating before getting to that point, we never were able to reach the full process. And so by allowing ourselves, and this is the scary part that most people are like, oh, I don't know. When we sit in the pit of pain, we process the pain. All of a sudden, we find the peace. And typically afterwards, that's where we start finding the passion and the purpose. And it's this beautiful process that intuitively we know, but we continue to cut that off before we can explore it.
Yes. One of the things that I think that's the key is the realization of this lie. Because I think you said it that, we justify it a lot of times and we don't see that it's a lie. And another angle is because of the shame that is always there. It's very difficult for people to share and face the shame. So it adds to the concept of the lie because we want to hide because of that shame and guilt that happens. What do you think about that process?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I go deep into in the book as well is exposing the guilt and the shame because it's all self-generated. And that is the part that keeps us sick. So I remember hearing this is a while ago, but two of the biggest tools the brain uses to stay stuck or to stay sick is speed and secrecy. And so we start believing this shame and this guilt as a real thing. And if I get exposed, then everybody's going to want to leave. And it goes back to the reptilian part of the brain all the way back, basically just stating, if I am kicked out of my tribe, it means physical death. Well, nowadays it doesn't mean that as much, but the brain hasn't caught up yet. So it feels like not just physical death, but an emotional, a spiritual. And so when you stack all these things on, that's what continues the process to stuff. So one of the sayings that we say is you got to name it to tame it. Once we become aware of it and we can name what it is, now as we start talking about it, what's interesting is on the other side of processing that pain, that guilt and that shame begins to lift. It's like this illusion of this heavy blanket. And as we start going through and start speaking openly about the things that we thought were keeping us sick, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, that feels amazing. And then the reason why we do it in safe spaces is because now when I share thinking, I'm so broken, I'm so messed up, nobody else will understand, then the next person goes, you too? And then the next person, same thing, you too? And now all of a sudden, the lie in our mind of, I'm so messed up, 1 out of 8 point something billion people. So this is where as we start to kind of pull the blinders off and take a bigger general look at really what's going on. It's kind of like, well, from a logical standpoint, I don't think that 1 in 8 point something billion that I am that one. So let's start looking, and it's actually, it's every single person carries some sort of guilt and some shame. And as we start to explore, that's just part of the human experience. Now, all of a sudden, the weight is gone from there and we're able to take the steps forward to heal.
I've truly experienced that when I've been able to share whatever it was that I felt that I had shame outwardly in the public, in my books, in when I talk to people in, keynote speaking. It's such a lift of the pressure and the freedom that comes from that. There's such strength that comes from that, which is like, I've gone through these things and that was my power and that was my resiliency. And those are the things that I've learned. And, it's okay. That's who I am. And even if anything that was there that was shameful that I did wrong, it seems like sharing it and then holding the remorse that I've had about it being wrong, if I've done something wrong, or if I felt that I was a victim of a situation, that even if I shared it from the power place that, yes, I was victimized at that moment, but this is how my resilience pulled me through, hearing it back even, putting it out there in the world and then hearing it back to myself, I've experienced such a freedom. And I think part of, what a lot of times, like in recovery and treatment and with the clients, I also experience this, that when there is a listening and there's a courage of sharing it, putting it out there, that they feel much more powerful about who they are. That doesn't necessarily take away the manipulative brain of how the addiction works. So I think that these come side by side, and the more that you have the ability to share and put yourself out there, the more that you get to hear your own manipulative side. So it's almost like you're not hiding it from the world, and you're not hiding it from yourself anymore. And that voice just becomes more and more open, and you become more accepting of yourself, and even that part of you that is having some needs at that moment. And the only way that it's learned how to grasp those needs are to numb them itself one way, or destructive behaviors. So it seems like the sharing, becoming the truthful with the world, it also begins the acceptance of the internal process for people.
Yeah, it does. And that's the reason why I think so many people struggle with this, is because that's the protector in us. We have a protector, and it's been worked out so much our entire life that it wants to hold on to everything, because again, there's this illusion of, if I can control the information, we're fine, it's good. Don't shake it up, because remember how much worse it can get. Well, what we don't understand is we take away that voice from the hurt. And so the protector keeps coming in, just wanting to protect it. And so one of the more difficult parts is acknowledging the protector, actually thanking it, but saying, I want to hear from the hurt and the sadness, and I want to create a safe space. And this is the part that when I first started hearing this, especially as a guy, you're kind of like, that's kind of whoa, kind of airy fairy. I don't know if I want to talk about that, especially being a stuffer. But what's amazing is when you finally just trust the process and say, well, I continue doing it my way and I don't like the results. So let me give this other part a shot, where I actually allow these different parts of me to speak. And what had happened is my entire life, I beat up and judged this hurt and sadness within me. And I've actually given it a voice and just saying, look, I want to hear from you. That must have been so tough growing up that way. Because we all experience different forms of trauma. And once we give this part a voice, and that we're not going to beat it up, it's amazing at how even just in that moment, the internal dialogue starts to change. And once that starts to change, now new emotions kind of start coming up that really starts to allow us to feel in order to heal. And that's how we really cut off that process of, I call it the cycle of chaos, where we sedate and then we want to change, and then we sedate and we want to change, and it just continues to spin us out of control.
In your book, you do have a chapter that shares about how to create these closures from the past, which is you wrote as digging up the doubt, discovering the desire, devising a drive to dominion toward the future. Can you share a little bit about this process that you've explained in your book?
Yeah. I call it the 4D framework. So for some reason, the brain does not like open loops. So if you've ever been driving and you get this song stuck in your head, you just keep singing. You're like, I want to get that out of my head. One of the little tricks that somebody taught me is sing the song until the end. And then once you do, the brain goes, oh, that's complete. Let's move to the next task. So as we start seeing, the brain wants to close these loops. It'll even create patterns that it sees to try to close the loop, even if it's not there. And so understanding this is where there's a framework for everything. And so I go in depth in the book. It's called the 4 codes, and code number 4 is of closure. But it's really of just acknowledging. So like you said, of digging up the doubt, knowing that doubt is just a human form. It's an emotion. It doesn't mean I'm bad. It doesn't mean the world's going to end, but trying to close the loop. The brain thinks of worst case scenario, and then it continues to play that out again and again. And the protector comes in and says, listen, we don't want this to happen, so we're going to shut this down. And that's how we stay stuck. I'm trying to think of everything that's coming up to my mind right now throughout my life. I imagined a horrific worst case scenario. Even the crap that happened in my life was never the worst case scenario that my brain played out. And so as I started to see that and started talking with other people, I don't know of anybody that's like, man, my absolute worst case scenario played out. Now, there might be little parts of it, but the brain just goes so far to try to keep self-preservation. And so that's why so many people will call it the comfort of chaos. It's uncertainty behind that door. Even though you're saying it could be a beautiful place, I don't know what it is. So at least I know this type of chaos in my life, and it's somewhat comfortable. Even though I don't like it, it's uncomfortable. There's a comfort to it. And that's what keeps us stuck in this cycle, trying to close the loop.
So because we had four codes, we just hit the fourth code because you shared to, so I brought it to you. Would you like to tell us the other three codes?
Sure. So the first code is the code of collision, and this is one that a lot of us miss. And when we teach this, most people think, "Oh yeah, okay, I'm gonna collide with other people, places, and things." Well, that's the second part. The first part is learning how to collide with. I call it the little internal terrorist. And one of the big things is like I no longer negotiate with the terrorist. Up here, it thinks of some of the craziest things. Like even this morning, I was just talking with a few people about it. The alarm went off, and the little terrorist inside said, "No, no, we're gonna sleep in." It was a rough weekend. We did a ton of stuff with the family. This is our time. Let's rest. And there was such a part of me that thought, yeah, I deserve this. Like the little, I think you called it the little monkey on there. Like, oh, we deserve this. But I thought, you know what? I no longer live by how I feel. I live by these codes and by, I call them the 5 foundational freedoms. And because I live this way, I do the work anyways. And so as I did my first fruits, the 5 to thrive, within about, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 reps into it, finally this part of the brain started to kind of submit to the process. And then I started feeling much better and said, okay, now I can be of service. Now I can go out and do what it is I'm supposed to do. So that first code is the code of collision, to collide with the internal narrative, to make sure that you are living in alignment with this new version of you, which leads, go ahead.
Before you go to the next one, I think what you said is a very, very important factor. I don't want to pass, through it, but there is a place where I think that for people, a lot of times they get caught in their emotion, and their emotion becomes the most important factor in their life. Whether it's having 1 or 2 emotion which they're comfortable and they keep feeling and releasing, and I even say you get addicted to the chemistry of that emotion and you keep creating and reproducing it. So one angle of it is that. Another one is because they don't want to handle the emotion, like you said, they stuff it, but the emotion still becomes the forefront of every angle, and our decision making becomes around our emotion. And I think there's a time in our life, which is as a very, very young child, that's all that is available and everything goes through emotion. But, pretty much around the age of 10, where the frontal cortex starts building rationalization. And by age 25, this whole piece is set up. So it's very important to go back into rationalization and commitment-based life, where you're committed to certain values that you want versus still going with just allowing your emotions to move you. And you said that and kind of like passed through it, which like, okay, my emotion, but I told myself I'm no longer emotional-based life. It's going to be a code-based life. I just wanted to put a light on that, which is so important, that for our success in life, and not just success in life, but the reality of what our capabilities are. Our brain is set up for rationalization plus emotion, and they're both supposed to be there. So if we just hold it back to a very young age, and that's all we had, that's all we had was emotions, and then we only went with our desires, that the life just doesn't work.
Yeah, in emotions, the part I wasn't aware of, and then I still forget from time to time, is that emotions are muscles. And so it's, what emotions are you working out consistently, and is that serving you? Well, when I look back at after college, I was working out depression all the time. And so I was actually shocked when I kept feeling more and more depressed. Well, I was looking at feelings as opposed to facts, but the feelings create what feels like facts. And so by understanding this, starting to look from different perspectives, I was the perpetual victim, and I was really good at blaming people. And I had someone in my life that said, well, why don't we start blaming more intelligently? And I thought, well, what do you mean by that? Well, if you're blaming your family for this, which is a negative, what if we started blaming them for the other part, which is the positive? And at first, because I hadn't worked that out, it's kind of like, well, what are you talking about? And so we started looking at, well, how about forgiving your life? Like the odds of you being you, your dad meeting your mom at the same time, at the same place, that one sperm, that one egg gave you life. Do you know what the odds of that are? And it's funny because I don't know what scientist did, but somebody actually ran an algorithm of what are the odds of, as opposed to my mom being alive in the 1200s and my dad in the 1900s. So I wouldn't have been here. I'm kind of like, I never thought of that. My brain doesn't work that way. And so as we start looking at these different things, we can start training our emotions that will actually better serve us. And so One of the other aspects I didn't know until I really started going into this code deeply of collision is I could feel depression at such a deep level. I couldn't feel any other feeling at that level. And through doing the work, the beautiful thing is look at how deep you can go in this emotion. What if we started training these emotions over here, such as love, gratitude, and you could feel them equally as deep? And that's the part where I went, I never thought of that, of a superpowers. I can feel so deeply, but I never thought that that would work over here. I was so one-sided. And so now part of my daily practice is really jumping into gratitude and love and all these wonderful emotions and feeling that, as well as I still jump into, I call it healthy guilt and healthy depression, to feel it, to still honor that part. And it's like, wow, I don't have to necessarily label as good and bad. I can enjoy all the different emotions and then look at which one is going to serve me. Do I really want to tag into today? So that's the code of collision. Then from there, once we're colliding with ourselves, looking at different perspectives and questioning our internal reality, I guess you could say, we move to the code of creation. And this is where I never knew that I was unconsciously creating everything in my life. My choices, my decisions, my behaviors from yesteryear were creating my reality today. And so being able to look at that going, well, let's go to the future. What kind of version do I want to be? Once we create that, then we start borrowing from that future version. And of course, I go in depth in the book, but as I start borrowing this, I begin to create the life that I desire. And it's over the 5 foundational freedoms, which real quick is fitness and health, faith, spirituality, my family and friends, all my relationships, finances, and then the one that they all sit on is of feelings. And so once we start to create this life that we want to live, that we were given the gift of life, then we move to the code of conditioning. And this is the one a lot of people, it's probably the least sexy of them all, where this is we condition the behavior. What are the daily do's? And we basically reverse engineer from, I call it our annual aspirations. What do I want 1 year from now? And we break it down to the quarterly quests, to the monthly missions, to the weekly wars, to the daily do's. And then it becomes so simple of going, well, here's the 5 things that I need to do today. I can really do this. And then as we condition, we get the law of compound growth. So after a week turns into a month, turns into a year, you become unrecognizable and you've built this wonderful version of you that is genuinely and authentic, the version that you knew you were meant to be. And then we just rinse, repeat the code of closure, and then we go from there.
Mm-hmm. So there was a third one, retrain your wire, your brain.
Yeah, that's the code of conditioning.
Conditioning. Okay. All right. So that's one you talked about resources and requirement and repetition and bringing all of that together so that you could bring from, for example, the emotions that weren't serving you to emotions, and then keep practicing that every day in order to kind of retrain your brain and move forward with it.
Yeah, it's basically stuff that we've already done. Once we label it and we draw it out, it's kind of like, oh, I've been doing this on autopilot, so I haven't been able to predict the results. Now that I input what I'm wanting, now I'm starting to get predictable results.
Mm-hmm. Everyone, I want you to know this book, The Recovery Way. This is the book for them to get. So when you're talking about recovery, what can you share the process of recovery from the addiction from your perspective? Yes, you shared about the codes and how we could go through the process, but what is your experience, your personal experience, and then also plus your experience as having the recovery center about the process of recovery?
Yeah, so here at the center, we do everything from detoxification services and inpatient to outpatient. Most people come in, and at day one, the saying that we hear so often is, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. There's got to be a different way. And so most people will come in thinking they have a drug or alcohol or gambling or sex, whatever the behavior is or the substance, that's what they're focused on. But what we found is this has actually become a solution to a deeper rooted problem. And this is what continues to keep them not having to deal with the real issue. And so we do this at the physical level to make sure that they're safe enough. But as we get to that core lie, that's really what we focus on, because as we start doing this deep internal work, that is where the work is done. We begin to see ourselves in a different light. And then the organic byproduct is they no longer want to sedate, because now they're starting to recognize, wow, that wasn't me. That was just a way of coping in the past. This is who I truly am. This is who I want to continue to become. And it's this beautiful process.
And what do you see the obstacle sometimes that comes in front of people? Sometimes I used to have also, I worked in the recovery and had a outpatient program for a long time. So it seemed, as I work with people who are in recovery, it has cycles, right? So they do come in, they go a couple of steps, and then the relapse happens, or there's a way that they do some destructive behavior, the monkey comes and gets them, and then they come back and they go to the next level. Sometimes there are people who go through the whole process and have the ability to stay in recovery for a lifetime, and some people don't, and they keep going back into some loop. What are some of the obstacles that you found through these years that becomes an obstacle sometimes for the person to come in and go through the recovery process?
So the obstacle, and it's very unique to each person because it's them. This is the part that is so difficult once we understand. So my obstacle for me continuing to heal is me. So when clients come in, it's actually them. It's their old stories, their beliefs, their values, their thoughts. And so that's why, as we get to the core lie, the whole point is to begin to start showing different perspectives, different potential stories, because our stories we take as truth. We think this is what my thought is, this is my emotion, here's my reaction, therefore it's true for me, this is reality. But what we don't understand is there's a whole process. As soon as we start having thoughts, every single story and memory that we have from our earliest memory is like the root to that thought. And if we're not starting to expose our stories to find out, well, why do I have a negative reaction when someone says this? If somebody questions my parenting, why do I go to guilt, shame, defensiveness, hurt, pain, as opposed to if someone challenges I'm just trying to think, like if someone said I have pink hair, like that wouldn't trigger me because I don't think I have pink hair. So it's not an issue. But if they're to come at parenting or different things, there's some insecurities that are exposed. I've got stories tied to that from passed down from generation to generation. So that's the part that we really start to unpack with them is what are the stories that lead to this thought process that evoke these emotions and then continue this reactionary way of living.
Part of another angle that I've also seen is that sometimes they accept coming to a recovery process where the pain of the addiction has bypassed the pain that they had before. So if they were using addiction in any format, whether the behavioral or substances, in a way to, like you said, as a coping mechanism for a deeper pain, they usually it works as long as it works. Right. I mean, obviously it worked for a little while and then it works as long as it works. And usually they come to a therapy or recovery center because the pain of now using it and the consequences of doing this type of a coping mechanism is getting harder than the actual pain that it was there. And one thing that I've noticed is as they come in and they work a little bit about this and they bring the pain down, the consequences a little bit down, it's the association of the coping mechanism of any sort of that type of an addiction, the association of that still with comfort and pleasure in comparison with facing the pain, it still shows up and sometimes takes them back right into the loop. So the consequences are high because they're no longer, whether it's their body can't take it, their finances can't take it, their family and mates can't take it. Somehow there's a reason where they finally say, I'm done, I'm going to come into to go into the recovery. And when the consequences comes down, their body's feeling better, or their mate is saying, okay, I'm so glad that this is happening, and then they'll come through, their finances are getting a little bit stabilized. You could watch this monkey start reminding them of the pleasure of the coping mechanism because they don't want to face the pain that you're talking about, right? So it's like they get it. Oh my God, I got to go deeper and check this out. But then, that monkey comes in and says, no, you don't have to go through pain. Remember the pleasure that we experience from that. And it takes them right back into a loop until they, kind of like relapse and then they go right back into the consequences that they had, and then they'll come in, and then we begin the process, from where they are. And I don't say we go all the way back to the first time, because every time they go through this process, they've learned something. They've gained a little bit of more strength where they can come in, and now we'll start from where they are today, and we take them to we'll go together in this journey to their next level of recovery. What is your experience with what I just shared?
Yeah. Pain is this interesting experience that tends to diminish. So there's a saying in the program that people will say is keep day one close. And the reason why is because when we break something physically, we are in so much pain. But eventually, once it heals, if we go back and try to remember the pain, we have a memory, but we don't experience that actual pain anymore. And so that's where the brain starts to rationalize and justify and create these little excuses of, well, just once. And so when we look at living a pain-based lifestyle where it's going to take pain to change, that really gets us stuck. So there's a few things that we'll do in the early beginning with some of the clients. And then depending on their journey of how do you keep day one close, and not just a thing of I remember. So I remember I stumbled upon this. This was years ago. We had a client who had been to a lot of different treatment centers and would keep saying, this time it's different. And I remember maybe it was like day 4 or 5, and we were just having a conversation, just kind of one-on-one. And you could tell he was feeling a little bit better. And it was interesting because he said, I know I need to be here. And I know the way my brain works. In another week, I'm going to come up with excuses like, you can't let me leave. And we're not a lockdown facility. And he says, but the problem is there's nothing you're going to tell me that's going to change my mind. Like, how do I break this cycle? And just this light bulb went off. And I said, well, what if I didn't have to tell you, but what if you told yourself? And I remember he looked at me confused. I said, what if we grabbed your phone and you actually videoed yourself right now? And you just spoke to that future version of you that you're terrified is going to take you back to where you just were 4 days ago, saying, I will do anything to get out of this. And what was amazing is, fortunately, he was game for it. He said, well, let's give it a try. And so I just held his phone so he could talk to himself. Now, he went on for about 5 to 7 minutes of all the terrible things that he had done to his family, who he loved so much, all the pain that he was feeling. He actually started to describe his body breaking down for those 4 days before he finally went through the hump. And he actually started crying, and I started crying. And it was this beautiful moment where finally he talked about all the pain. I remember afterwards we hit the stop button, and I said, here's the beautiful thing is you don't ever have to live that pain again. And sure enough, about a week or 2 later, he's like, I'm out of here. I don't need this anymore. I'm fine. And I walk in and he goes, you're not going to talk me out of it. And I said, I'm not here to talk you out of it. I said, I want to see if you can talk yourself out of it. And I'll never forget this. We sat down together, played the video, and he just started crying. He said, I don't even recognize that guy. I don't ever want to go back. The reason why I shared that story is because we tend to minimize our pain when we're out of it. We tend to do so many things just out of survival. And so sometimes of actually documenting that pain from a place that we can go back and look at to keep day one close and to remind ourselves, like, it's no longer about trying to avoid pain or chasing pleasure. I want to have a complete different life. And then so that's just one tactic. We use a lot of different ones, but that's one that when you asked just popped in my mind that I remembered was so effective. And I've used that myself in certain areas as well, where it's amazing when you document yourself in just that pit of pain, and you can go back and see that there's this feeling that's attached to it that you can look at and say, I'm so thankful I'm not there today. And no matter how crappy today seems, I don't ever have to go back there because that was way worse. And it does something to the brain. It just hits different.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everyone. The Recovery Way: How to Deal from Any Addiction and Start Enjoying Life Again by Mark Manderson. Mark, anything we haven't shared that you really want people to know?
The only thing that I can think of is really if a person is wanting to change behavior, it really comes down to habits. I call it habits over hacks. It seems like everybody has these hacks these days of, well, if you cold plunge and you do this and these different things, which aren't necessarily bad, but it's like we put way too much on our plate thinking it's going to do these things. So I don't know, maybe a few years ago, I put together this Google document of just these basic habits that slowly but surely retrain and rewire the brain. And I call it healthy selfish. We call it first fruits. It's like, I'm going to take care of myself for that first part every single morning so I can get better for me to help other people. So anytime I do one of these, I let people know, if you want to follow me it's on Instagram. Our handle is at Pacific Shores Recovery, and just DM habits. I'll send you that free document that goes into the different habits that actually starts to create a complete different lifestyle.
Beautiful. And that's where they can also find you, right?
Yeah. You can find me there if you want to have a conversation. For the book that you just showed, you can get it on Amazon. There's an audio version, paper version. Basically, they have everything nowadays.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us and sharing your experience. Where is your recovery center?
We are in Newport Beach, California.
Oh, right beside me.
Yeah. We're just south.
Awesome. I gotta go come over and visit.
Please do. We'd love to have you.
Yes, we'd love to. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for taking your experience and putting it in a book so, that you could share it with others. And anything to wrap up?
No, just thank you so much, Doctor, for having me on. It's been great talking with you.
Oh, thanks. And for all of you who are here with us, take good care of yourself, take care of yourself and everyone around you, and make a positive difference in every move that you make. And until next week, bye-bye.
Are you a psychotherapist looking to enhance your practice? The Awareness Integration Therapy developed by Dr. Foojan Zeine is a comprehensive guide to the principle and techniques of this powerful therapeutic approach. Join the growing community who have elevated their practice and expanded their skills by embracing Awareness Integration Therapy and witnessing its life-changing impact. Order your copy on Amazon now.